our last video, we've seen how the youngest daughter of Charles I of England, Henrietta, grew up in French court alongside King Louis XIV and his younger brother Philippe. In this video, we will continue with the story of Henrietta's marriage. Henrietta's husband was Philippe, who was King Louis's younger brother by 2 years. Philippe resembled their father more than King Louis did. He had a slender face and a more pronounced chin like their father. While Louis was a bit more masculine, Philippe was a beautiful and elegant man. The title used for Philippe in the French court was Monsieur. This is a title given to King's younger brother. Only one person in the royal family can be called Monsieur, usually the eldest younger brother of the king. But for Philippe, he wasn't immediately called Monsieur when Louis became the king. This was because their uncle, who had long been known as Monsieur, was still alive. That uncle was Duke of Oreleans, Gaston, the younger brother of the Louis XIII. So, to distinguish between the two, Philippe wasn't called Monsieur, but instead was called Petit Monsieur. It wasn't until 1660, after the death of his uncle Gaston, that Philippe dropped Petit and was called Monsieur. With his uncle having no heirs, Philippe also inherited the title of Duke of Orleans. In 1660, the newly married King Louis also had no child, so Philippe, as Monsieur, held a high status in the royal family, second only to the king. He was also the heir to the throne. Louis XIV was known to be exceptionally cultured and talented in many ways, but Philippe was by no means inferior to his brother. Their mother, Queen Anne d'Autriche, particularly doted on the second son, Philippe. But soon after her wedding, Henrietta, now we will call her by the French version of her name, Henriette, soon discovered two serious issues with her marriage. One problem was that her mother-in-law, Queen Anne, continued to treat her now adult husband as if he was still a child, constantly interfering in his affairs. And Philippe was happily letting her. He was an extreme mama's boy. The other problem was that her husband already had a person he was passionately in love with, and that lover was not a woman, but a man. Philippe was bisexual. This revelation was a significant shock to Henriette. Growing up as the second son of a king, Philippe's position was complicated, to say the least, and in no small part due to his mother. It is almost expected for the younger sibling of an heir to have some issues. But Philippe's situation was even more complicated than the usual heir and spare dynamics. Because Louis became the king at such an early age, Philippe was the heir to the throne, first in line of succession, from when he was 3. But Queen Anne also saw how the presence of a powerful sibling of the king can cause complications. She herself had to face people who rallied around Gaston, who was the younger brother to King Louis XIII, during the Fronde Rebellion. Gaston's life was also quite tumultuous, starting and ending with rebellions against his brother, Louis XIII. The person who complicated Gaston's life was none other than their mother, Marie de Medici. Driven by her lust for power, she constantly manipulated Gaston as a puppet in her power games against Louis XIII. Louis XIII's repeated leniency towards Marie de Medici further emboldened Gaston, leading him to instigate rebellions himself, which were then followed by reconciliations with the king. As the result, France was in a state of constant unrest. Queen Anne was determined not to have such history repeat itself. She wanted to prevent any seeds of sibling rivalry. Therefore, Philippe was raised to yield and obey his older brother in everything from a young age. As the result, Philippe wisely did not show any signs of rebellion. He always followed his brother's wishes, and, even as an adult, consistently acting submissive toward his brother. Queen Anne's methods of controlling Philippe didn't end there. While her intention might have been simply to prevent conflicts between the brothers, some of her actions seem quite extreme by today's standards. From a young age, Queen Anne raised Philippe like a daughter, often dressing him in girls' clothes and calling him her pretty daughter. It appears she intentionally tried to instill femininity in him. Perhaps as a result of this upbringing, or perhaps because this upbringing further encouraged his innate tendency, Philippe developed a lifelong preference for wearing dresses. Even as an adult, he often attended balls and parties dressed as a woman, and people around him came to accept this as his usual behavior. As Philippe went through adolescence, he became aware of his sexual identity, finding that he is attracted to handsome men. He became lovers with Philippe de Lorraine, who was known at court as an angelically beautiful man. It was in this state that he entered into marriage. Initially, Henriette was puzzled and deeply troubled when Philippe, who had been passionately affectionate towards her at the beginning of their marriage, suddenly became distant. Later, she discovered that Philippe had a male lover, which caused her great distress. To make matters worse, Philippe would run to his mother for advice on every matter. This meant that her mother-in-law was always well informed about every detail of their lives, often surprising Henriette and causing her great discomfort. This led to Henriette having significant dissatisfaction early in their marriage. Then, there was King Louis. To recap Louis's situation at the time, he was famously involved with Cardinal Mazarin's beautiful niece, Marie Mancini. He wanted to marry her, but she was deemed to be unsuitable because of her family background. We followed their love story in one of our prior videos. Queen Anne and Cardinal Mazarin practically tore them apart and got them married separately to others in a hurry. And Louis's new wife was Princess of Spain, Maria Theresa, eldest daughter of King Philippe IV and Queen Isabella. This Queen Isabella was a sister of Louis XIII, so Louis and Maria Theresa were doubly cousins in their mother's and father's sides. From her various portraits painted by Velázquez, you can see how pretty a girl Maria Theresa was. She was also a quiet and shy girl. But she is said to have been not intellectually bright. She struggled to learn new things, such as new languages. And combined with her shyness, speaking in public was very difficult for her. The negotiations between France and Spain for Louis and Maria Theresa's marriage were extremely intense. In Spain, women could inherit the throne, so as the eldest daughter of the King Philippe IV, Maria Theresa had a strong claim to the Spanish crown. This was a very real concern for Spain, because King Felipe's only surviving son, Carlos II, was extremely weak, and was not expected to live very long. If Maria Theresa were to inherit the throne, there was a risk that Spain could become part of French territory. Spain was desperate to avoid this, so they included a clause in the marriage contract requiring Maria Theresa to renounce her claim to the Spanish throne. France, on its part, wanted something back in return. Mazarin, the master diplomat that he was, added a clause demanding a massive compensation in exchange for Maria Theresa's renunciation of the Spanish throne. While this demand was reasonable, the amount was so substantial that Spain could not immediately pay it. Mazarin proposed that Spain could pay this dowry later. Since this arrangement did not require immediate expenditure, Spain agreed to it. This clause, however, would later become a significant issue and play a crucial role in shaping the future history of both countries. But anyways, for now the negotiation was successfully concluded, and Louis and Maria Theresa, now Marie-Thérèse in French, traveled to Saint-Jean-de-Luz, located on the border between the two countries, to get married. The church where the ceremony took place has preserved much of its original appearance, allowing us to imagine the atmosphere of that time. Louis thought Marie-Thérèse, who was blushing like a beetroot in front of him, was actually pretty cute. After the wedding, as they spent time together, Louis felt that his wife genuinely liked him, which was in fact the case. Marie-Thérèse admired everything about her new husband, his appearance, his confident demeanor, and his ability to captivate crowds with his talents. She had never encountered a man like him in Spain. She was completely smitten. There was one problem from the beginning. Marie-Thérèse barely spoke any French, and Louis was very poor at Spanish, leading to significant communication issues. It was difficult for Marie-Thérèse as well, suddenly living in an unfamiliar environment where she couldn't communicate with anyone except her Spanish maids. But there was one other person Marie-Thérèse could communicate with, and that was her aunt, Queen Anne. She had complete support of Queen Anne, who helped improve the relationship between the couple. But soon, both Louis and Queen Anne faced an unexpected problem. The new queen was lacking in several areas. The most significant issue became apparent during official court events. As the queen, Marie-Therese was expected to host and take center stage at events like official balls. However, her shyness and awkwardness in public, combined with the language problems, would cause her to freeze up completely in large gatherings. Although she gradually improved, it was unimaginable for her to be the center of attention at such events. Her awkwardness quickly became a topic of major gossip at the French court, known for its quick judgments for people's wit and sophistication. People frequently criticized the queen's inadequacies, and many even mimicked and ridiculed her behavior, turning it into a source of entertainment. Louis knew of these gossips, but there was not much he could do. But there was good news too. Just a few months after their marriage, Marie-Therese became pregnant. For a queen, the most crucial role was to produce an heir for the kingdom. If Marie-Therese were to have a son, those who mocked and derided her would no longer be able to disrespect her, at least not so openly. The news of Marie-Therese's pregnancy was soon followed by Philippe's wedding to Henriette, which took place on March 30, 1661. As with any wedding, the bride was the center of attention, and Henriette was really shining. And at the celebrations that followed, she left a lasting impression with her beauty, liveliness, and wit. One person who couldn't take his eyes off her was King Louis himself. They had known each other since childhood, but Louis had never imagined the ugly English princess would transform so dramatically. When Louis first heard that his brother Philippe was marrying Henriette, he laughed at the idea. He remembered her as a girl who looked like a skeleton from the graveyard, and the idea of marrying her seemed ridiculous. So seeing Henriette as a stunning beauty at the wedding was a complete shock for Louis. England had originally hoped for a marriage between Henriette and Louis. Before his marriage, Louis had heard rumors about that possibility, but dismissed them, considering Henriette too unattractive to be a suitable bride for him. Seeing her now, completely transformed, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of having missed out on something good. Meanwhile, the new groom, Philippe, was delighted with his new bride. Her beauty and charm made him feel proud, and he felt the sense of victory in the subtle competition with his brother. Henriette, who could have been Louis's wife, was now his, and this turn of events was a pleasant surprise to him. And Philip must have felt a sense of triumph over his brother. Throughout his life, he had always conceded everything to Louis, which surely would have built up some feelings of resentment. People can suppress those feelings, but they never truly go away. The buried resentment and the intense, hidden competitiveness only grow stronger over time. But now, at least in terms of marriage, he felt like he got a better deal than his brother Louis. The courtiers who mocked Louis's wife, Marie-Therese, now showered Henriette with praise. Philippe also couldn't help but notice the envious glances Louis was casting towards Henriette. Enjoying the admiration and attention, Philippe spent most of his time with his new wife after their wedding. Unfortunately, this bliss was short-lived. After about 2 weeks, Philippe left Henriette to answer the call of his lover, abandoning her. After her marriage, Henriette immediately became a star of the French court. She was not only beautiful, but perfectly fit into the court life. From a young age, she excelled in French language, was intellectual, and had appreciation for culture. She skillfully charmed everyone around her with her wit. She was also talented in various activities, and was particularly good at horse riding. So she often led the charge in hunts and such. Her figure was well proportioned, and she was said to be very graceful in dancing. From her young age, her mother, Queen Henrietta Maria, had put a lot of effort into Henriette's education, and it paid off. In French court, Henriette was called Madame. The title Madame was second only to the Queen, and the Madame can stand in for the Queen during official events in the Queen's absences. Many in French court secretly, and not so secretly, compared Queen Marie-Therese to Madame Henriette, the new Duchess of Orleans. Some even wished Henriette were the Queen, echoing Louis's sentiments. Louis was dissatisfied with his wife, who is surrounded by Spanish attendants and unable to converse freely with him, and Louis found his shy and awkward wife embarrassing, especially when they are receiving foreign dignitaries and ambassadors. Over time, he wished Henriette could take on the role of the court's hostess, and soon, Louis decided his wife would no longer attend public functions, and Henriette would take her place. This decision shocked many, but no one opposed it, except Queen Mother Anne, who sympathized with Marie-Therese. Marie-Therese was deeply hurt by Louis's decision, but also partly blamed herself, and couldn't say much. Henriette, on the other hand, felt it was her duty to support the king as Madame. She also enjoyed the attention, especially noticing Louis's admiration for her. The opportunity also allowed her to escape the sadness of her own marriage, caused by her unfaithful husband and her domineering mother-in-law. Henriette became the court's new hostess, accompanying Louis to various events. The two grew close quickly. Louis, now often seen smiling and happy, seemed transformed by Henriette's presence. As they spent more time together, people started to suspect the relationship between these two. This was because they not only attended official events together, but also began spending more time privately. Only Louis and Henriette would know whether those two crossed a line, but, at the time, numerous memoirs mentioned their affair almost as if it were an established fact. And for Henriette, she certainly enjoyed the attention she was getting as Madame, and being the hostess of the court events. Philippe's own affairs with other men certainly didn't help the situation either. And whether or not true, rumors naturally began to spread, and eventually reached the ears of the two people who would be hurt the most, and those were Philippe and Marie-Therese. And each ran to the same person, the Queen Mother, Anne. Marie-Therese kept sobbing in front of her. Philippe ranted and raved, and cursed Louis and Henriette. What can Queen Mother do? How can she put things back together? We will continue with what happened next in our next video, so please like and subscribe to continue receiving more stories from history. It really helps a small channel like us.